My name's Chris Boot. I work as a photography editor independently in London. I worked in community photography at Magnum and Phaidon Press. I published my own photography lists during the aughts, and then the last decade as director of the Aperture Foundation. On the occasion of the presentation of some new pictures by Mahtab Hussain at the Stephen Bulger Gallery from this Saturday, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce Mahtab tonight, his background and his current work. I'm actually not going to introduce Mahtab at much length because we've asked you, Mahtab, to do that yourself in terms of talking through your evolution as a photographer and artist. Mahtab's work over more than a decade has been concerned with issues of Muslim experience and identity, and he's the author of 4 artist books, and his work has been recognized in many exhibitions and with awards that include the New Art Exchange Curator's Choice Awards. How our paths converged is that I bought your book, You Get Me, at the MAC booth at the New York Art Book Fair in 2017 and sent you a direct message on Instagram to say how much I liked it. We started chatting then, and then when I got back to the UK this year, we met for a coffee in Peckham in August, the outcome of which is that he and I are now working together. I'm helping support this, this project about Muslims in North America that Mahtab is now embarked on, which means I'm not impartial. I'm honored to be your advocate, Mahtab, and for your information, this work is being funded by the sale of city-focused portfolios to date, Toronto and New York. We are both extremely grateful to everyone who supported this project, and for the Toronto work, especially Dr. Abdullah Altani, Peggy Amerson and the East Wing Gallery Doha, Stephen Bulger and the great team at Stephen Bulger Gallery, Darcy Colleen and the Scotiabank Contact Photography Festival, and everyone who agreed to have a portrait made as part of this project. Please, everyone, come to Stephen Bulger Gallery if you can, between 2 and 5 p.m. on Saturday, when, Omicron depending, I have to say, Mahtab will be present. The work that's being exhibited there will be on for a further 2 weeks after that. I would just like to add that I've learned a lot while working with you, Mahtab, and what is particularly exciting is how this new work isn't just a set of images. I mean, they're images that are part of a conversation, but it's a much broader conversation than simply the visual. It's about experience and issues of representation. And while heretofore you've been in conversation individually with your sitters, starting with this event tonight, we're trying something more public and have invited several of Mahtab's sitters to join us. They'll be joining us a bit later on in the conversation. I don't expect to say much. I will play the role of chair and move things along if I need to. Please post your questions in the chat box as we go along, and we'll make sure there's some time at the end to put some of them to Mahtab and perhaps also our other guests. Please visit the work while it's on show, and that's it. Yeah, Mahtab. Would you like to take over and introduce yourself and your background as a photographer and artist?
Sure, thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for listening and watching right now. Yeah, my name is Mahtab Hussain. I'm a photographer, artist. I've been making work now about the British Muslim experience for the last 15 years. And as Chris said, we met in August, and I've had this incredible opportunity to come over to North America and start making work about the American experience. It's definitely something that I've been wanting to do for about 5 years, and it was, yeah, I jumped at the chance. And but I'm going to give you a little bit of background about my work and how I got to this stage. So I actually worked in museum and galleries.
Do you want to let us see your full face and stop the screen share while you're just talking?
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, I actually in my background, I actually worked in museum and galleries for about 8 years. I studied art history as a student, and I studied photography as a college student, and did media studies and performing arts, and you know, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my photography practice. So you know, I was kind of like, plan B, what's plan B? And plan B was to study art history, and it was because I really fell in love with the history of photography, and the idea was to kind of work in museum and galleries, which I ended up doing. My last job was at the National Portrait Gallery in London for 3 years, and I worked as a design assistant. And what that meant was that I worked with every single department in the gallery, from you know, the art handling team all the way through to the curators and the exhibition teams. And you know, I worked with 16th century, 17th century, 18th and 19th and even 20th century curators, and I got to know the kind of inner workings of these amazing spaces and how you put on national you know, blockbuster shows and even work with the smaller displays. But you know, over that period I felt very invisible in these spaces, and I also got very frustrated when I did see my brown skin reflected on the walls. They would tend to be in the education spaces, this idea that we need educating. And I just was like, man, where are these photographers who are making work about the British Muslim experience? And it was out of frustration, because I love working in museums, and I really loved working at the National Portrait Gallery. It was a real family for me. But out of frustration, I, you know, decided to pack it all in, and essentially you know, quit at the beginning of the summer and see what I could do with my own practice. And 2 years before, I was making work. So I'm going to share my screen now so I can show you how I started. Okay, cool, it's working. Okay, great. So look, so this was a kind of year into working at the National Portrait Gallery, and I started to make work at the weekends, any holiday time. So I went back to Birmingham, and Birmingham was a space that I grew up. I grew up in Birmingham from the age of 7 until I was 19. And these were the kind of guys that I used to hang out with at college. So I used to go to areas like Alum Rock and Smallheath and Spark Hill, very predominantly Muslim areas. And I started to kind of make portraits of young men, looking at ideas of, you know, boyhood, manhood, street culture, looking at kind of collective identities of religion and the cultural pressures, looking at kind of styles, what was going on at the time. And, you know, at the time we had David Beckham in the UK, and he was wearing, you know, he's doing his hair in cornrows, and, you know, a lot of the Asian guys were also doing a similar thing. And I was like, well, this is really interesting how the Asian male is kind of looking at the Black experience as a way of identifying themselves within British society. And then I started to kind of wander into some of the gyms in Birmingham, and Birmingham as a kind of city is full of bodybuilders. You know, it's as you leave London and go up north, the bodies of men just tend to become more masculine and very hyper. And so, you know, Birmingham is the starting point, and a lot of the guys love to train. A lot of the gyms are very affiliated to some interesting cultures and communities. And this was Sal, who I ended up meeting, who owns an incredible gym called Flex. And I got to know Sal really, really well. And I really wanted to kind of talk to him about hypermasculinity, but also this idea of kind of feeding the beast, essentially, in terms of stereotypes and how the media wants to portray us as violent and threatening men, essentially. So when Sal walked in one day with this t-shirt on saying the soldier of Allah, I was like, I've got to make this portrait. So, you know, a couple of, you know, I guess a couple of weeks later, I said, Sal, I really want to make a portrait. Do you mind putting on this t-shirt? And he was up for it. And I was really trying to challenge this idea.
5 more minutes for your introduction.
5 more minutes. Okay, sorry. So yeah, so I'm going to just kind of move on. But yeah, I started to kind of make work looking at beautiful brown men, you know, and I wanted to talk about real representation, not only in photography, but in fashion and how we're invisible. Started wandering in boxing gyms as well, which I thought was very relevant because of people like Prince Nassim Hamed, Amir Khan, Muhammad Ali, you know, these incredible people who became part of the Muslim experience. And then this was kind of my first show, which looked at, you know, identity formation. So very quickly, you've got collective, social, and ego identity as you're running through. And I wanted to talk about those complexities within the kind of Muslim community of young Asian men. It was an Arts Council grant, which allowed me 6 months to make work in the city of Birmingham. And these were the portraits that I started to make, you know, portraits looking at like stylistically mogul miniature paintings, again, looking at guys and their cars. This was a kind of reportage style of work that I was making. This particular portrait won the Curator's Choice Award in New Art Exchange, which then allowed me to have this incredible residency and a main gallery show, which was my first show, really looking at the migrant experience. And at this point, you had Nigel Farage, a very politically charged right-wing individual in the UK, demonizing us as rats and vermin. And I was really worried about this. So I wanted to make a work about humanizing our experiences. And of course, we've had Brexit since then, and the damage that it's done to us in the UK. One of the portraits I made was of Hassan, Mahmoud, and Norman. And, you know, I reconnected with Mahmoud, and he talked about how important it was to see himself reflected, and this idea that no one ever takes pictures of who, you know, of people that look like us, and this idea that even though photography is silent, it gives us a voice. And it was like a really beautiful conversation that I had with him a couple of weeks ago about this. And then I was doing an MA, which was funded by the Arts Humanities Research Council, which looked at Muslim women in contrast to the men, and how I think the man is kind of putting on this kind of real male bravado in their sense of being proud, whereas Muslim women have started to conceal their sexuality, but also in a way to kind of identify themselves and to be proud of being Muslim women. But of course, that kind of brings a lot of unwanted violent attention because they are visibly identified as Muslim women. And this idea that, you know, they're looking at each other, there's a strong sense of sisterhood, and the fact that they want a challenge and they're actually streets ahead of the guys. So I'm literally firing through this presentation. And then I had a wonderful opportunity with Multistory, and this was my second publication with Dewey Lewis. This particular project looked at the nail bomb that exploded outside a mosque in Tipton in Birmingham, a very quiet community, very traditional community, but I wanted to look at the impact of that particular moment, because a lot of the young men and the women through my research were talking about this idea that there's going to be a global war against Muslims, that we are going to be kicked out of England. And, you know, and the reality is that that's kind of happening. You know, if you look at what's happening politically in Britain right now, the Conservative government is changing immigration laws, changing our British citizenship to the point where, you know, even I'm worried that my citizenship might be taken away and then I'll be told to leave. And the idea of like, well, where do I go? You know, England is my home. It's my country. I've given 40 years of my life. I have a daughter who's now 8. So what do I do? And then so from that, this was my You Get Me series, which actually took 9 years to get to a show, but it opened up in London. Mark Seeley curated it. We had this amazing opportunity. I had this amazing opportunity in London. We basically positioned Muslim men as beautiful, fine art portraiture. We positioned them, you know, worthy enough to grace museum and gallery walls. I put quotes on the walls to really talk about the psychological trauma that this community has gone through and been under. And we also have the young boys kind of positioned in these smaller frames to talk about how do we stop the next generation from feeling disenfranchised. And the young boys were kind of behind glass. And this particular show, when it opened up in London, we had over 600 people come to the opening. In terms of press, we hit close to kind of 2 million online in 2 months. And it was an incredible moment. And it really, for me as an artist and as an art historian, I was really able to kind of position us within the art historical canon. And that was really important for me. And then, of course, the book from Mac, and that's how I connected with Chris. And at the back, we basically put these dubious headlines, which demonized the community. And that's what I wanted to do, was trying to crystallize this idea of how politically we've been positioned over the last 20 years as threatening, as violent, as people who want to take over, words like jihad, extremism, terrorists, all these things. And then from that, I needed a little moment, because I was like, I can't do this political work, and I needed to have a little break. So I ended up doing this project which looked at the myth of returning home, and it's called Going Back Home to Where I Came From. And people like Nigel Farage were saying this narrative of like, go back. So the idea was like, well, I'm going to go back and see what my life could have been like if my parents didn't decide to come over to England. So this was a project that was really paying homage to my mum's memories and her stories that she told us as we were growing up. This was the well I would have, you know, my mom went to get water from. When I made this portrait of a young boy, I talked about, you know, I could have been this boy kind of running in the river and jumping in the stream instead of running away from the racists. And it was this kind of really romantic moment to, you know, fall in love with Pakistan and Kashmir and show Kashmir in a way that no one's really seen before. And, you know, when I showed this work, a lot of people were talking about this idea that, oh, I thought Pakistan was a desert. And it's like, no, it's not a desert. It's incredibly rich and diverse. And this was the kind of work that I was making. And we had this beautiful show in new art gallery in Warsaw. And I also built a mud house, which is kind of paying homage to my grandparents' humble beginnings in Kashmir. And then, so here we are. And I wanted to show a few portraits from the New York City work. The New York City.
Do you want to just frame the whole
yeah, sure.
here and tell us how it came about, or how
yeah,
you it at least?
Totally. So, you know, the idea was to always go to New York City first. And of course, with COVID, I wasn't able to, as a UK citizen, to fly directly to America, to New York City. So we kind of made a decision on what we do. You know, Chris and I were talking about it, like, what do you do? And you know, one of the options was to go to Toronto, and I was like, yeah, let's do that, because Toronto has this incredible diverse community that I've just heard about. And so I thought this would be a great, you know, Toronto would be a great place for me to just kind of establish myself. I haven't made street portraiture for a while, so this idea of kind of warming up as well and making, you know, making the work. And so yeah, so that's kind of how Toronto happened. But I'm really grateful because I had the most beautiful 2 weeks in Toronto, and, you know, made over, you know, 30 portraits. And but I want to quickly just show 4 portraits from New York City, because that was the kind of moment that crystallized conversation. And, you know, New York City was an incredibly intense period that I had for 4 weeks. Met some amazing people from all walks of life, and it really is like the Hajj of you know, of the Muslim experience. And then this is the kind of Toronto work, and I'm presenting everything that I've made there. And, you know, really fell in love with the people that I worked with in Toronto. There's a gentleness there, but there's also an incredible complexity.
How did you meet your subjects? I mean, your prior work involves you walking the streets and encountering people in the street, but this time it's more online, isn't it? Where you're
yeah. So the way I started with Toronto was that I was literally, you know, hanging out on the streets, and I ended up going to the local university, Ryerson, and you know, and just kind of waiting at the concrete steps and meeting people, and then showing them my books. And then from that, we connected through Instagram, and through Instagram, then it kind of rippled. And as people started to talk about, oh, there's this guy from the UK coming to make portraits, and so, and then the conversation just kept flowing. And I have to say, there was a few key people who in the series who just opened up their books. And you know, I'm super grateful for those individuals who were very sharing and very trusting in that. So yes, it's Instagram that I ended up using, but actually the most important thing for the Toronto series was for me to just kind of wander and walk and hang out and just be around the university, because you know, that was a great space for me to really find people. And I think, and from that, you know, I ended up making 30 portraits over the 2 weeks. And you know, it was an intense period, but it was also a very beautiful period. And there's this real sense of community, and this drive to change the narrative, and this drive to you know, talk about real representation. And so yeah, and of course, you know, I was learning so much as well. You know, the narrative of Islam is very different. There's a gentleness there that I think in the UK we just don't have, because of experiences of right-wing groups who, you know, like the National Front, like Combat 18, like the movement of Paki bashing, that just didn't happen in North America. So yeah, so this is the kind of work. I've interviewed everyone, you know, we're still spending time transcribing the work, and you know, this is kind of a very kind of early part of the research, but I'm really excited to kind of introduce you to 4 sitters who have agreed to be part of this particular conversation online. And I call them sitters because they're not participants, they're not subjects, they are people who have agreed to sit for a portrait. And so yeah, so hopefully everyone will kind of turn their cameras on. We have Maha, who I've made this really beautiful, strong portrait of her. We met at university. I think Maha, you and I did approach you. So, and you were very kind enough to meet me on another day. Ahmed, again, I saw Ahmed walking down the street, and he was like fiddling with his hair, and he took his hair out of his ponytail. I was like, right, I gotta go and say hello to this guy. And Ahmed and I are now connected. Ahmed's a big kind of car guy, and I wandered around Mississauga with him, with all his mates, and so that was really cool. And Abra, we met in Hamilton, and we had a wonderful couple of days just kind of getting to know each other and your friends, and yeah, the scene again around Mississauga. And then Mo, who's this amazing kind of human rights lawyer, and also kind of a runner, and is kind of champion his own experience and Muslim experience around Hamilton. So yeah, so I'm excited to introduce you all. I'm going to stop my screen, and yeah, and let's just kind of like have a conversation. So I've done a quick introduction. If all of you lot would like to introduce yourself quickly, that would be great. I'm going to start with Maha. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Maha. I'm 20 years old and I'm in my 3rd year of journalism. And I was actually on campus when I ran into Mahtab. I was going to the library and he just stopped me on the way and he showed me his work. And I've always kind of like, one of the reasons why I kind of went into the field that I'm currently in is because I wanted to be part of the media and make sure that I kind of like reclaim the narrative in a sense and be able to put out stories from like the right perspective, because I feel like a lot of people, whenever like I would see like news stories and outside, I would be like, this is so wrong, like you sound so ignorant when you speak on issues that concern us. So I kind of like, that's why I joined it. And then Mahtab started telling me about his work and I was like, well, this is great because this is what I want to do. This is the type of work that I really, really appreciate and value as well. So yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to be a part of this project and take control of the narrative and put myself out the way that I want to be shown and not the way the media wants to show us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Abra, I'm going to go to you next. So a little introduction.
Thank you, Mahtab. So my name is Abraham Shumshia. I'm a mental health counselor located in Hamilton, specialized in trauma. I'm originally Syrian. Born but did not grow up in Hamilton. I have my own organization, which is a bit growing up, where we provide like trauma-informed, culture-sensitive mental support for newcomer and immigrants. I met Mahtab through a friend. She's a good friend of mine, and when I did read about him and his work in UK before, and I was like so fascinated because what I most liked about the project is how he tends to break that stereotype that we perceive, especially for me as a young hijabi Muslim woman who's trying to be leader. I get myself in too many discrimination. Like I faced lots of discrimination, and the people, how they perceive us, like that we're not nice or we're not fun or whatever. So I always value the people who work towards breaking that stereotype and the stigma that we face, and we're just a human at the end of the day. So that's what really fascinated me to be part of that project. I tried to also, like I love the project and I want to see it growing, and like not just in Toronto. That's the first exhibition. I'm hoping that you're gonna have one soon in UK and in New York too. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. And Ahmed, I'm going to jump.
Can I just to the Stephen Bulger, to Scott at Stephen Bulger Gallery. There's actually Fatima. I think Fatima is saying on the chat box that she'd like to join too.
I would love Fatima to
invite her
join
into
if she's there. That'd be
well.
awesome. Yeah.
If that's possible, Scott.
Yep. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
You can continue and I'll add her.
Okay, Ahmed, I'm going to jump to you next. You're in a Tim's.
Yes, I am the most Canadian of Canadian places I could possibly be.
Love it.
So yeah, I'm Ahmed. I'm 19. I also met Mahtab at Ryerson, same as Maha. I was on my way to to find a place to study, and he ended up actually running up behind me and being like, hey. So yeah, he showed me his books, and I thought it was a great thing he was doing. You know, I played hockey when I was younger. I went to a very Christian school, so I was exposed to a lot of what some might say, well, yeah, put it blatantly, a little bit of racism. So it's when he showed me his work and told me what he's all about, I thought, you know what, I would love to be a part of this.
Cool, thank you very much. And Mo, can we jump on to you next?
Hey, Mahtab.
Hey, Mo.
So my name is Mo. It's short for Mohammed. I currently live in Hamilton. I'm a lawyer here at the Hamilton Legal Clinic. I work specifically within housing and human rights. I was born in Saudi Arabia in Jeddah and lived there till I was 9 before coming to Canada. And since in that time, I've always had struggled with what it meant to be Muslim, especially as a biracial person. And so desperately tried to run away from that identity because of what I'd experienced throughout my life, but was often always pulled back because as much as you try to run away from it, my name is Mohammed, and you'll always be pulled back. You'll always be first known as a Muslim person. And when I saw the work of Mahtab, it was actually online through a friend named Fatima, and she had posted about it. And I was so intrigued because you don't often see work, especially within photography or within popular art, that's dedicated specifically to speaking to the Muslim experience. And, you know, I started going through his Instagram and seeing, you know, the many different faces of what it means and what it means to be a Muslim, what it means to look like a Muslim. I was immediately drawn to it. And I actually reached out to him to say that I loved his work and I thought I was too old to be a part of this work. And then he was like, no, you're young enough. And so he asked me to be a part of it. And he came to Hamilton and I saw him pulling up and I was like, man, this is the coolest dude. I feel so grateful to get this photo taken by him. So I feel very honored to be a part of this project. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. And Fatima, so excited that you've managed to join us. Thank you so much. And yeah, Fatima and I, where did we meet? Well, I ended up coming to you, didn't I?
Yeah, I had seen on a group chat that there was a photographer who was looking for help for some project that he was working on. And I'm one of the film students at Ryerson, and I assumed it was one of the photo students. So I agreed to help, and then we do this whole shoot, and then he pulls out his website and he's like, oh, this is who I am, by the way. And I was like, oh, you're actually like an actual photographer and you're a professional. And he's showing me his work. And I was like, oh, I thought you were a student.
Oh, great. I'm grateful that you think I'm a student at 14, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So great. And where were we? I can't remember where we were. It was near your hometown, right?
Yeah,
so,
Richmond Hill. We shot in Richmond Hill. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, look, let's open up the conversation, and we've got a platform here. We can really talk about, you know, the Muslim experience. I mean, what is it like? You know, one of the first questions I always ask is like, what's it like growing up Muslim in today's world? So I'm going to point to someone. Let's go to Fatima. What's it like?
I think my experience might be a bit different from everyone else here. I went to a private Muslim school for my elementary, and then I went to a Catholic high school after that. So I think my experience might be a bit different, but it's definitely different than how other people grow up. You have to live up to certain expectations. I think with the hijab, a difficult part of it is you think that you're the representation of this religion and everyone is going to judge the religion based off how you act. which is like a lot of pressure when you're young and you're growing up, that I can't do this because then everyone's going to assume that Muslims are terrible. And I think the biggest thing I would say is that growing up Muslim is a lot of pressure.
And where does that pressure come from? Abrar, would you like to talk about that?
I think the media is the biggest stream that could add a lot of pressure, how that society and the global society perceive us as a Muslim hijabi woman, especially. Also the community that we grow up, especially here, that the racism, the systemic racism that we face, that comes from like growing up in a Western culture, that also add a lot of that pressure, how the other people, the human, like, you know, that the citizen receive you or work with you as a threat sometimes, or as someone who's too strict, who is maybe not open-minded, as they label some people or some Muslim out of us. So there's so many. Yeah, I think media is the biggest reason behind that, and that's why I really appreciate the work that you're doing, because the representation is so important, and who we are truly is so important for the world to see us in our true identity and our true color, and also how diverse we are. Like, people perceive Muslim, or especially hijabi Muslim, oh, they all think the same way, they all act and behave the same way, but that's not true. We're really diverse. We have our own beliefs, and we also disagree in our own beliefs sometimes. So we're human at the end of the day. So yeah, and I think that's what I have to add.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things when I walked away from the conversation I had with you, bro, was this idea that, you know, we like to have fun too, you know, and you know, and I was like, that's a really important thing. I mean, what kind of, you know, pressure you must feel that people must think that you're boring or that you're reserved and all these things, and so yeah,
assumptions, a quick assumption, like justifying first, okay, facing the quick assumption and putting yourself in a position to justify who you are or explain who you are. That's for me, it's so frustrating, because I don't want to explain who I am, or justify, no, I'm a fun person. Really? Like, why would I do that? So quick assumptions, justification, the stereotype, we already talked about it. The expectation, as Fatima already mentioned, that you represent the whole religion, which is not the case. Why, you know, like, that's a huge pressure that our families add on us, and when we go out to the world also keep on adding that. Like, no, at the end of the day, we are human, we do mistake, we're not perfect, we're not angels. So that's also another kind of pressure that we face. And I don't know if Fatima or other guys, but Maha would like to add something on that, but that's for me.
If I could just jump in on like the whole people think we're not fun. I've had that experience all the time. Like, I'll be spending time with people, and then there's someone who I don't know very well, and they go, oh, I thought you were so tightly wound that you would never do something like this.
Exactly.
And it's like, why wouldn't I? I'm young, I'm in my 20s. I like having fun just like everybody else likes having fun. But yeah, I think that assumption is the worst one people make. That's worse than being assumed as a terrorist.
Yeah, that's what. Exactly. Oh, I totally agree with Fatima.
The terrorist one kind of gives us a little bit of an advantage sometimes.
Go on, do you want to talk about that, Ahmed? What's the advantage?
It is pretty bad, though. I'm not gonna lie. It gets pretty bad a lot of the times, but sometimes you never use it to your advantage.
Yeah, you can use it.
Yeah. So Ahmed, what about you? You know, I think, you know, I remember when I spoke to you, and I hope you don't mind me kind of saying this now, but you know, when I said, are you Muslim, and you were kind of challenging me with the kind of conversation of what you know, what it means to be Muslim, and you were very open about how, you know, you're not as religious or you're not as devout as maybe others. And you know, for the series, it's not about being a devout Muslim, it's about identifying Do you want to talk about your experience with Islam and where you are with it, and and of course the racism that you experienced in the high school, and maybe some of the young men that we talked about together? That I'd love to hear it.
I mean, I identify with the people, not really the religion all that much. It's just religion in general. It's not really for me, I prefer internal, an internal compass and everything like that. Not saying that Islam doesn't give you that, but it's just something, it's just preference. But I do love the people, and religious people as well. They're wonderful people. Sometimes they're more wonderful than, otherwise.
And you talked about, sorry to interrupt, you talked about this idea of like, I did ask you, I was like, what have you taken from Islam? And I think one of the things you said was community and also like the idea of like charity and not individualism. And would you agree to those things?
Yeah, of course. Community, that's one of the big things that I actually appreciate about religion is the sense of community. And I think that's definitely necessary. And that's why I still, I don't completely say like, hey, I'm atheist or agnostic. I was born and raised Muslim, and I love the Muslim community. Yeah.
And then you told me about that young man in your school that was kind of played around a little bit.
It was bad, but it was kind of entertaining because I wasn't part of it. He was Muslim as well. I believe he was Pakistani Muslim, if I'm not wrong. And a white girl, she basically used him for like, just doing things. She did that to a lot of different people in the school, but I remember that was he was particularly bad because he didn't really like her. And she also, like, there were other, there was Lebanese, Egyptian, 2 Lebanese girls, an Egyptian guy, another Egyptian girl that was their brother, sister. She did not like any of them. The only reason why she was like okay with me, I never interacted with her. So she had no opinion about me. But yeah, everybody else that she did interact, that was Muslim, Arab, anything like that, she just didn't like. Just the whole family was a basket case, honestly.
And then, I mean, one of the things, so growing up, I didn't say in my presentation, but I experienced a lot of racism for 10 years. There was a lot of violence for me on a daily basis with either young boys, people in my school, men on the streets. And it really formed my experience. And for a while, I really resented my own Muslimness or my Pakistaniness or my brown skin. And what I found meeting, people in the UK, but also in the US, is that a lot of the participants or the sitters wouldn't have these direct experiences, but would know about people or would know about how they're positioned. Has anyone here like struggled or had direct experiences with overt racism? Mo, would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, for sure. Before I came to Canada, I grew up in Jeddah, and I'd never really experienced racism or religious discrimination because the majority was Muslim. And then as soon as we came to Canada and I was 9, we moved to a small town called Belleville, Ontario, a predominantly white town. And I was very quickly othered really fast. I was the only brown, my sister and I were the only brown people in our city, constantly targeted. And it actually became much, much worse. I'm a lot older than a lot of the sitters here. I'm 35. And so when 9/11 happened, I was 15 years old. So as soon as when that, I'd experienced a lot of racism, but when that happened, there was a massive change in the way that my town saw me, in the way that my town treated me. We have an air base that's just right beside our town. So my parents, myself, my sister, we were all the targets of overt racism. And I was desperate in the same way that you were, to separate myself from the religion. That's when I started going by Mo. I'd never heard the name Mo until I was 12, because my older cousin was also named Muhammad, and he switched so that people wouldn't see that as a signifier. I started leaning more towards, my other half is Filipino, my other half is Lebanese. So I started leaning more towards being Filipino, not letting people know. Because for the most part, when people look at me, they see an Asian person, a Southeast Asian person. They don't see an Arab. So I was desperate to run away from my religion because of that, because of constantly being in fights, constantly being beat up, name called. I remember actually an experience when I was 16, crossing the border, and I was held for 14 hours, trying to cross over the Buffalo border, and then they wouldn't let me cross. And my parents had to come drive the 6 hours to come pick me up and bring me home, because it's funny. My parents gave me a choice. In our passport, you have to identify where you're born. So my sister decided against it. She said, I'll take my chance. But I was like, you know what? I may as well not run from it. My name is Muhammad anyway. So in my passport, it says I was born in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So to this day, as soon as people see that, it's a red flag. And more so especially between 2000 until 2008, until essentially Obama was elected. But that really spoke to my entire youth, running away from being Muslim so desperately, because of the amount of racism and discrimination that was targeted towards our family.
Jump in with a question there. I mean, it feels like, Mahtab, I'm immersing myself in your work at the moment. It feels like this is a good moment for new conversations to begin. I mean, is that how you feel, Mahtab, as well as those of you who are participating in the project, i.e. that the possibility of change is upon us? Is that?
Yeah, I think so. And I definitely more so now than even when I started, 15 years ago. And I think, part of that is social media and the power that we have now online, and the fact that we can have a voice and that we have an audience, and that audience is strong and it supports our experiences. Countless magazines, countless online publications have come through now, and I think the bigger brands are starting to realize that actually we can't ignore this community. And so this idea of real representation and us controlling the narrative is exciting. And I'm grateful that I'm in a position, I'm 40 and I can use these wonderful tools to kind of challenge these narratives, but also the fact that I think, we're 20 years after 9/11, and we've been so silent and trying to figure out how we navigate this. And actually the generations behind me are like, I'm done with this. I'm going to just challenge and push, and let's fight back. And I want to see myself reflected. And as a result, the 2 weeks in Toronto kind of proved it, with the amount of people that are really willing to put their, and they're brave. I have to say they're incredibly brave to sit in front of my lens and be part of this series and have a different conversation. So yeah, Maha, I'd love to jump on to you next. And I know you talked about real representation, and this is what excites you about the project, but I'd love to know more about your motivations, as a young Muslim woman who's 20 years younger than me.
Well, I have I have a couple things to say. So one of the first things that I wanted to address was the fact that I don't know why there's this thing where everyone's like, oh yeah, Canada is so like diverse and they're so welcoming, and like, there isn't as much racism, and and it's so diverse, you don't have those problems there. But the thing is that a lot of the people that say this have never experienced it in their life. And I'm like, how are you going to speak for us when you've never ever experienced that in your life, right? Like, I don't understand why they feel like they have the right to say that to us, right? And it's kind of demeaning as well, and belittling of the things that we experience. Like, let's go with Toronto, one of the most diverse cities. Someone told my parents to go back to their own country, and I'm like, this is the city that you claim is not racist, and we don't have those issues here. And I feel like the problem that is that when it comes to the States, like the United States, we're like, oh yeah, those guys are so racist. But the only difference between the United States and Canada is the fact that they're outright racist and we're subtle about it. They'll never show you that they're racist. You'll just know. There's like, I feel like when you're like a person of color, you just have that like sixth sense, or like if you're from any like marginalized group, you'll just have that sixth sense where you can tell that someone's being racist, or they have that like undertone that only you can pick out on, even in like a group of people. So like for example, I had a vice principal when I was in high school, and she's like so supportive and like nice and stuff like that, like. And then later on I found out, like I think like a year after I graduated, that she got removed from the school board because she made comments about some Muslim student like building a bomb or something, and they were doing some like robotics project or something like that. And I'm like, this is the, like, I only saw one side of her, but this is what that's her true self, right? And it kind of like, you know, you just start reevaluating things, and you're like, everyone just has a facade of being welcoming and nice to you when they harbor such negative and disgusting feelings towards you, right? And Mahtab, I told you this already when we're talking about like sports. I've been in sports my whole life, and I like absolutely love it, right? And I was playing fast pitch softball, which is a predominantly like white sport, and like everyone else there is white, and I was the only South Asian hijabi on their entire actually the entire league. So there's different divisions, and out of everyone I was the only one. So it's subtle, like I mentioned earlier, but like parents like pick on you, and like they notice you specifically, and you stand out. So then you have to be like, I have to go that extra step to prove that I'm worthy. And no one else has to do that. I have to go out of my way to prove that I'm just as good as everyone else and I deserve a chance. And then after that, when they're like realize, they're like, oh yeah, like they're actually good at this sport, or like, you know, you actually want to play, you're like, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, like literally every other kid here. And I'm only like, I'm 15, 16, trying to prove to these like 50-year-olds that I'm worthy and I'm supposed to be here playing the sport that I absolutely love, right?
Just
And
describe my entire hockey career right there.
right, like I feel like, and it's subtle too, right? Like they never, like it's never obvious. And then one more thing where I've noticed is when they talk about you, they'd be like, oh, I don't see you people playing it. And when they see that they say you people, you know what they're talking about. You people don't play the sport, right?
I had the same experience. I was a swim instructor right before COVID hit, and I had that exact same experience where parents were worried that I wouldn't be able to teach their kids how to swim.
Exactly. Like, why do you think that just because I have this on that I'm incompetent, or I can't do it, or I can't play? Like, I just don't understand. And why do I have to go out of my way to prove it to you? Why is it's so unfair that everyone else is given the chance, and then I have to, like, you know, take that extra step, spend extra time, work extra hard just to get the same thing as them, right? And I feel like, especially being a Muslim woman, we have that extra pressure, not only from outside, but from our own community. When I wear this scarf outside, like people on the outside tell me to take it off because they're like, oh, you're oppressed. And then I go back to my community and they're like, you're not wearing it right. And it's like, you're just stuck in the middle. I'm like, where am I supposed to go? And I feel like that was so important with Mahtab's project. I'm like, this is my space. This is who I am. When no one gives you space, you make your own. And this is what this project, I felt like, was truly about, making my own space. This is my box now. I define how it's going to be built. I define how I portray myself. I define how I'm gonna, you know, who I am. And yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say right now. But I feel like one of the most important things with us, kind of like Chris was talking about, like, you know, what do we need to do to like change, right? Just change in general. Like, one of the first steps to that is acknowledging that there is a problem. And there is a problem. You can't say Canada's diverse and so welcoming and not racist at all, right? It's wrong for you to say that when you don't understand. And that's the thing, right? Like, I feel like that's one of the most important things, is to acknowledge that there's a problem, and then we can work towards solving it. Yeah.
Maha, I'm going to jump in there. We've just got a very few minutes left, and we have got some questions from the audience. I'm going to direct them at you, Mahtab, but if you want to draw any of the sitters into the question or to the answer, please feel free. The first question is from Stephen Bulger. What was the reaction of people that the sitters shared their portraits with?
that a question for me, or is that a question?
Well, I'm putting it to you, and then you can decide how to.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. What was when I shared you your portraits? What was your reaction? Did you share it with your friends? Did you, yeah.
I haven't shared any of the portraits with anyone yet because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to.
Oh, you were so allowed to. You're so allowed.
I wasn't sure, but I remember when you showed them. I don't think I'd ever seen myself from that perspective. I felt very powerful in like the way you had taken. I don't know about other people, but the way you had taken pictures of me, it was almost like from a position of power. So yeah, I felt like very powerful and very cool in those pictures.
Thank you. Mo, you wrote a really lovely post, which touched my heart when you wrote it. Would you like to talk about that moment?
Yeah, it was something like visceral when I saw the photo for the first time. There were a lot of things about it. One, well, first I'll say what Ahmed was saying really spoke to me in that I don't necessarily see myself within the religion, but I see myself within the people. And in that photo, it allowed me to express that as a biracial person, as someone, I'm wearing a gold necklace and a gold wedding ring, which, even from my dad, that's haram, you can't do that. I had a dog beside me wearing bright shoes, bright shirt, with my orange hat, baggy clothes. It allowed me to show the world and show myself that this is what it is to be a Muslim, whatever you want. Sorry.
Oh no,
it gives you that emotion. And when you see yourself in that and someone else sees you that way, I think that's exactly what you want out of the photo. And that's what you want out of a project like this. To create that experience for people, not just the sitters, but when the people look at us, that this is what it means to be Muslim now.
Oh, that's powerful. Thank you so much, man. I feel very blessed. Thank you. It's perfect.
Because there's a few questions and only 5 more minutes, I'm going to jump to another one, which I'm abbreviating this question. It's from Homer Rizvi. How, Mahtab, did you find your work received by the art world in general, and what can other Muslim artists do to find representation?
The reality is that it's been a big struggle, but a beautiful struggle, and there's been incredible people who've over the years have seen my work and championed it. So it's I think being an artist is tough anyway, but I've had some amazing people like Mark Seeley, Craig Ashley, Chris, yourself, Skinder Hundo, who's like now the director of the British Council, and the Arts Council and the British Council, and I've just pushed and I've pushed and I've pushed and I've been relentless actually in this pursuit, because I'm like, this, as we all are doing in our own little way, trying to challenge. Mo, with your running group, Abra with your counselling service, Fatima, you want to be a filmmaker, Maha, you want to be in the same space, and Ahmed, are you still doing your sports? Are you where are you in this right now?
Oh, right now I'm just studying. It's biomedical science took over my life, but yeah, I want to be research. So we're all doing our thing, and mine is the art, and I've had some amazing people who've kind of supported me, and what do other artists do? It's like just keep making work and being like relentlessly driven to not take no for an answer. And I've had so many doors closed on me. I more doors have closed than that have opened, but I feel like there's a responsibility for me to make this work. So that's kind of the answer, really.
And if I may add to that, what strikes me about you, Mahtab, is you take a knock in the morning, but you're back up on your feet by the afternoon, and you're keeping at it, and you don't let those knocks put you off, which is kind of amazing, really.
Yeah, many knocks, but yeah, it's like, okay, that's we can move on, and I think that's for all of us and all of our experiences. and one of the questions I really wanted to ask was like, how are you dealing with this pressure, like this trauma of being rejected and this indifference and this violence? Because, like Mo, you got emotional. Like every now and then I get really emotional as well, because I'm like, this is hard, right? This is really hard to be in this position where we have to prove our humanity. And, and I love the fire that you all have. And so I'm, like that's, I think there's a question there, like, how are you guys doing this? I'm doing it in my way, but how are you guys keeping going? How you guys still got your why? Because the why is a big thing, isn't it, really? Does anyone want to answer that?
I think you reach a point where you realize, well, okay, people are always going to see me as the other. So either I can change everything about myself until they accept me, or I can be who I want to be and have them deal with it. Like me, for example, I'm in film. My program is very wide, and there are certain people in the program that I've realized will refuse to work with me. And I'm not going to change their opinion. And I just have to accept that and find my group of people who do accept me and are excited to work with me on stories about my community, and they want to be a part of that change. It's really about like finding your community and just realizing that you either have to change everything about yourself. In my case, it's my name too. I think that's what someone told me. I started wearing my scarf 3 years ago, and I was speaking to someone about the stress I had around my career and wearing the scarf. And he said to me, your name's Fatima. If anyone sees that name, they're going to know you're Muslim anyway. What's the difference? So either I have to change everything, or I can just be who I want to be and let them deal with it.
I'm going to try to squeeze one more question in, which we've got from another member of the audience online. It's from Valeria Bembry. In your introduction, Mahtab, you mentioned the Black aesthetic and culture adopted by some of your photographic subjects. Have you had the chance to have conversations about that attraction? Is it the subversion of status quo, anti-oppression messages, or something else?
Yeah, what is it about? It's about anti-oppression. People like, oh God, my lights have died. Sorry. People like, I'm in the dark there. Sorry. Like Muhammad Ali, Nation of Islam. They were really like big moments for us as a community because they ultimately gave us a voice. And I think the Black experience is so powerful is because that is the only other marginalized community that has real representation in popular culture across the board. And, for me as an artist, the only way I really found my voice was looking at Black artists, people like Yinka Chinabari, Carrie Mae Weems, Sonia Boyce, and then, reading around cultural theorists. And it's all about this idea of you can't see where you're going unless you see yourself reflected. And I think that's why, I make the work that I do, and I be very blunt in my artistic practice and say, I just want to put brown people on museum and gallery walls and position them as, noble sitters who are gracious enough and beautiful enough to grace these walls, and then be part of the art historical canon. Because I think once we can get into those positions, because they are really powerful spaces, then there's a limit. It's unlimited to what opportunities we can have. So that's kind of what I do. And yeah, the Black experience is powerful, and of course the Black experience is also a Muslim experience, and that's what the New York City work is really going to show, which I'm really excited about. And going across the US, it's going to kind of crystallize that experience too. Well,
Mahtab, I think we've got a message from whatever it is that's put your lights out in at home. We can't see you now. Yeah. We've come to the end. No, we did say we would finish by 6 p.m. and it's just gone. So I just want to say thank you to all of you on the line now who we're looking at for participating like this. It was completely brilliant. I want to read one thing that somebody's written in the comments box. This is from Darcy Colleen. Not a question, but a big congratulations. This discussion was so powerful and so important. What Maha said will be in my thoughts for a long time. So proud of all of you. I'm very excited because We haven't done this before. You know, we've been looking at pictures, listening to interview questions. I look forward to many more discussions. You'll all hear about future discussions as Mahtab continues this conversation on the road throughout the USA and otherwise. And thank you to all of you. Thank you to Mahtab. Thank you again to Stephen Bulger Gallery and everybody for allowing us to do this today and for the show. And do go and see the show and continue this there, please.
Yeah, and thank you so much, everyone. I'm so excited to have you all here. And it's, you know, for me, it's really about a collaboration. You know, I always say I don't take a portrait, I make it. And it's, you know, people like yourself that make it happen. So I love the fact that we've been able to use the power of Zoom and to, you know, animate this conversation in a way that I've never done before. So yeah, I'm just super grateful. So thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, you all dropped the mic. So I'm really pleased. Yeah, thank you so much.
It was great. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.